everyone, and welcome to Reclaiming Fertility Joy, Healing the Broken Spirit of Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome. I am your host, Corey Ray Kovacs, registered nurse and women's wellness mentor and educator. And I am joined today by a wonderful person who's working in the functional health and hormonal health coaching arena. This is Iris Verstappen. She is a certified hormone health coach, functional hormone specialist, orthomolecular advisor, and birth worker with an academic background in medical anthropology and women's studies. She also qualified in traditional midwifery practices and trauma-informed coaching. She holds space for people to come home to themselves through embracing their bodies and cycles, practicing cyclical living, and being in flow with their cycles instead of going against them. Well, welcome, Iris. We're so happy to have you here on the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's such an honor for me to be here and to speak about such very important, pressing topics.
Absolutely. It's one of those things that getting to kind of share our message and our passion and really about, our passion about our flows, our passions about our cycles and our cyclical beings. This stuff really excites me because this is an aspect that I find has been so life-changing when I started down this path, and I know for you too. So I would love to hear about kind of your journey to where you're at today in terms of, supporting women in this role and your mission to help them.
So my journey is threefold. I'm going to keep it short because it's quite a big story, but one of the factors was my own birth, being born prematurely 2 months early. Then there was my own journey on and transitioning off of hormonal birth control. And then there was me working as a cultural and medical anthropologist in the south of India, doing research and attending and witnessing my first birth there. And these three factors have really led me to feel such a passion for how we look at our bodies, how we are not educated about our bodies, but how necessary it is. So it was really important for me on my own journey to discover, like, hey, there is not so much information out there, but we deserve this information. We deserve to be educated about our bodies. And I never intended to have the job that I have right now. I always intended to become like a medical anthropologist teaching at university, but my path just kind of like diverted, and I really studied to become a doula, to become an orthomolecular advisor, hormonal health coach. And I kind of like rolled into this field just by, my community being curious about what it was that I was studying and people asking me questions. And at a certain point, I was like, okay, I can really make a business out of this and make this my day job and make sure that I can help as many people as possible, because I was doing this on the side first, having another job. But then I realized, oh my gosh, there is so many people who need help. And so I started off as a doula, as a birth worker. And then through that, I kind of like transitioned into the menstrual health space, because I feel that there is like, people start to like think about care when we start pregnant, but a lot of the care actually starts before that. So I'm really, really grateful that you were also focusing on this with this summit and really focus on fertility, but also the preconception phase, which is of extreme importance when it comes to health.
Right. And this is something, it's so interesting because I feel that mirroring in my own story and how I got to what I'm doing, because it started with the babies. My own personal fertility journey plus a traumatic birth sent me into the path of midwifery as well, and that was kind of the course that I took, and had to divert off a little bit, but it's amazing how when you start and you see and you witness a birth, how you also end up going back into the fertility aspect, because it's all connected. The fertility, the preconception, the connecting with your cycles before that, because it's not just about the babies, there's all of it. And you talked about this period of trying to conceive and how important and essential this is. I know during the summit, we've been talking to a lot of specialists, naturopathic doctors and nutritionists and registered dietitians and things like that, talking and really focusing on nutrition and stress reduction. But I would love to discuss with you the emotional components of this part of our lives.
It's a
Um,
it's a huge topic, and especially weaving it into PCOS, what this summit is about. I think people with PCOS have like an extra component to it when it comes to getting pregnant, because first of all, there is like the cultural narrative about having a menstrual cycle, the cultural narrative about bleeding and ovulating. Like the standard cultural narrative is that women are considered like acceptable and hot and sexy and sensual during their ovulation, and then during the bleeding part we better like hide that, we don't talk about it, we have to put it away, there's a lot of shame on it. But with people who have PCOS, there is this component of the insecurity of when ovulation is going to take place. And so this can tie into feeling emotionally insecure about being this cyclical being. And then also having the insecurity of whether we're going to bleed,
yeah,
how we're going to bleed, what the blood looks like.
yeah,
There is all these extra factors that come into play when it comes to PCOS that I feel a lot of people don't really talk about. And obviously, when you're in your preconception phase, the one thing that you want to happen, obviously, is ovulation. And there is this really big thing with people who have PCOS who have anovulatory cycles, which are cycles without ovulation, which can bring a lot of insecurity, which can bring a lot of feelings of maybe guilt and an extra layer of shame that comes with, trying to conceive. And I've had a lot of clients who have PCOS and who really, literally told me, like, I have the feeling my body is failing on me. It is supposed to do this one thing. It's designed to fall
it's the
pregnant.
one thing you're
So
supposed to do.
it's the one thing. And I've had a client who told me, like, oh my God, my body has like one job and it's failing to do it. And it makes me feel so guilty and so bad, not only towards myself, but also towards my future children. So I think this emotional part and the responsibility that comes with taking care of the body and, doing everything you can and then still having the feeling that your body is failing on you, I think is the hardest emotional part of somebody with PCOS. And it's something that I see very often, and it's heartbreaking
It
because
is.
it's it touches on every aspect, because as a woman in a preconception phase, you feel like this responsibility towards your relationship, towards yourself, towards your future self as a mother,
Mhm.
to conceive this child, to carry a full-term pregnancy, to birth, to be postpartum and take care of the baby. So it's huge, this topic, and I feel that we often do not talk about it enough and give people the space to
Yes.
actually talk about it.
That space holding is so important because first off, we live in this world where we have curated lives online, where we pick and choose what we talk about. And so we create this life. So, I remember when I was going through my fertility journey, I was literally like two people. I
Mm.
had this space. Now, granted, Facebook and Instagram wasn't really that big, back in 2012 when I first started. So it was a little bit different of a place. But I remember, people would tell me and ask me what's up, about, how, are you guys going to have a baby soon or whatever? And I'm like, yeah, yeah, it's happening. And inside I was dying. Inside
Mhm.
I felt that those feelings that you were talking about, broken of like less than a woman. I felt like completely lost my femininity in that. And that, yeah, my body had one job and she couldn't even freaking do that. And that was so isolating. And that shame just built up and built up and built up inside until I was, many years later when I started going through that. But it's like if I had known that, if I knew then what I know now, going through and working through that stuff while I was going through it would have made a big difference in how open I was
Yeah.
and how open that my body was. And I truly do believe there is a strong component here between the emotional and the mindset that we have and the trust that the relationship we have with our bodies and our
Mhm.
ability for our bodies to function properly, because we are whole beings. We're not just physical bodies. We have all these layers. So
Yeah.
you kind of brought up this insecure feeling, and I really want to talk about that piece of feeling like your body just is not on your side. Like it's always a war. It feels like a
Mm.
war. So how do you help people when that kind of comes up? How do you help them see that aspect? Because sometimes it's so unconscious we don't even see it. How do you help them see this war, this kind of internal conflict that they have, and how do you help them kind of step over to the other side of that?
Yeah, I think the most important part that I mirror to people is that no body is ever broken.
Yeah.
Our bodies are communicating with us, and sometimes the communication doesn't happen in a way that we like to see it, like
Yeah.
an ovulation that doesn't happen, but that it is something that our body is trying to tell us, like without a judgment attached to it.
Mhm.
It's information. And this is my anthropologist part that comes in
Right.
it. Like as people, we are addicted to meaning making. We
Yeah.
want to give everything meaning. And sometimes things have a meaning, but it's not necessary that we know exactly what the meaning is, but what
Mhm.
we do with the message. So I always try to help my clients to see that and to not attach this judgment to what their
Mhm.
body is doing. And because when we attach a judgment to it, our moving space becomes very small
Yeah.
and
Box
we start
ourselves in.
projecting onto the judgment and the judgment becomes reality.
Right.
So I really try to like keep people from doing that and really stepping into their body with curiosity.
Mhm.
Because apart from not ovulating, the body is doing other things as
Right.
well.
Right.
Uh,
If your body's not ovulating, that means that it's your energy is being used elsewhere. It's
exactly.
that's what our bodies do. And I mean, not unfortunately, it's just this is how it works. Reproduction is kind of lower on the hierarchy when if your body thinks that you have the stress level like you're fighting a tiger, right? Or you're dealing with trauma and emotional things that have the stress and things of just living day to day, let alone all of the trauma that's accumulated in your body for the last 20, 30 years, right? Your body's trying to manage all of that. So reproduction is going to go down on that scale.
Yeah, and I think what is important for people is to understand that. And I
Yeah.
love that you touched upon that because I always speak about the hormonal hierarchy. So
Hmm.
cortisol and insulin are at the top. They get priority above everything else. So I look at it as a reverse triangle. So
Oh,
at the
okay.
top there is insulin and cortisol. And when you go further down, then we see our thyroid hormones and then we see our sex hormones.
Hmm.
So our body will prioritize other functions to keep us alive, which is a very smart thing to do. So I
Yes.
really try for people to understand that what their body is doing in that moment is in the best interest for their survival.
Exactly.
And
It's
once we move through that, and once we understand that, and once we understand what the components are to bring our bodies back to safety, because very often when insulin and cortisol are running the show, it's to keep us like in our survival state.
right.
But it's not necessary to stay in that like fight or flight like space. We can also come back to neutral so that
Right.
our body can start producing the other hormones again. And often this is like you mentioned, like, you know, some people work with like the very physical part. And I believe it's truly connected. When we start shifting, changing, supporting the very physical, like flesh and tasks that our body is doing, then we also impact the emotional component, because when we feel more spaciousness because our hormones are settling, then we also feel the space to move through emotional stuff that our body needs to move through.
I think that's a really interesting point that you bring up about the realization that, first off, our bodies are not against us, right? Our bodies are trying to support us in the best way that they can. I always refer to my body as a she, because
Mm.
I look at her as my teammate. She is my teammate. And honestly, to get spiritual, it's like she's my soul's mate. She's my soulmate, my soul's mate. This is how I am going through this life, is with this body. And so there was such a long time that I didn't take care of her, that I did
Mm.
not support her in the way that she needed, because I didn't understand the language. I didn't understand how she was speaking to me. And so, yeah, those feelings of like, it's me against my body, or that my body hates me. That phrase, I cannot tell you how many times I hear that over and over again with women who are experiencing PCOS, is my body hates me, and it's like, well, let's take a step back and see what this is, what she's trying to communicate to you, and
Mhm.
see it's not um it's not a loathing here. It's not a you versus her, or this fight. It is just survival. And we don't realize, because we're not getting chased by tigers and bears and running up in trees and having to go hunt for our food. We don't realize that our daily lives, how much that impacts stress levels and our insulin, and how and especially with PCOS, where the vast majority of us have insulin resistance. So how
Yeah.
our environment is interacting with us really does play a part. Um, Curiosity, this is like a key word I would love to talk about. And it's something that I've seen, kind of curiosity is the cure for judgment.
Mm.
And yeah, and so like how do you encourage curiosity with people? How do you help them just kind of see when they're at this first place, maybe they haven't looked at it before? How do you encourage that paradigm shift, really, to go from judgment to curiosity?
Yeah, so I love to work with something I call primal basic body needs. So,
Mm.
what is it that our body is showing us every single day that we can engage with, we can get curious about? And these can be hunger cues, this can be cues to go pee or poop, this
Mm-hmm.
can be cues of needing rest or time away from the screen. And really, these like teeny tiny cues that our body gives us, and get curious about how your body communicates those, because they go in a cycle, they go in an everyday cycle. And I love to work with what is. So I find it very hard to like give people like exercises and tasks to do, and because it doesn't work usually. I'm like, let's work with what is. Start listening to these little cues that your body is giving you,
Mm-hmm.
and get curious about how your body really communicates with you. Because a lot of people don't feel when they have to pee, they don't feel when they have to poop, they don't feel when they're hungry, they don't feel when their body is like going down a little bit, and the body goes like, oh, we could use a nap, or we could go to bed now.
Yeah.
So it's really about creating this sensitivity and getting curious about how your body is telling these things, and then being able to actually answer that need.
Yes.
And then, like, as a result, seeing how your body responds when you respond.
You literally are building a relationship. Like, it's so funny because
Yeah.
I love that analogy. You're building a relationship with yourself, because you've basically been living with this other part of you. And we grow up in a society that tells us to numb all those things out, to
Yeah.
ignore our body signals, to
Yeah.
ignore our cycles, to ignore our circadian rhythms, like
Mhm.
all of these things, because we live in a hustle culture, because we, even grew up as children having to sit down in a chair for 8 hours at a time. I mean, I don't know. I like my poor, my 9-year-old. It drives her insane that she has to sit down for that long, because I don't think we're meant to, right?
No.
And that we sit at our desks now, like literally. So we've been told that in order to fit in, that we have to stop listening to our body, stop listening to your hunger cues, stop listening to your rest cues. And, an even larger container for us being cyclical beings, right? That's our other container that we have, that we flow through this fluctuations of rest and expression. And we do that every, if you have a regular cycle every month or even a larger cycle. So understanding that, just teaching that little part right there and learning that sensitivity and of starts opening this door for further explorations. It really does.
Yeah, and it also really opens the door to wonder
Yeah.
and also pleasure, because
Ah,
when we,
yes.
when we start to hear these smaller cues of the body and become sensitive to them, it's also easier to enjoy the response that you give to it. Like enjoy like a really good pee or a
Yeah.
really good poop or a really good meal or a really good night of rest. So it's really about bringing back the wonder into the things that your body is already doing and becoming really intimate with it.
I love that you brought up pleasure, because this is something that we're missing in our lives. I feel like we just go through motions of life. We get up, we get dressed, we go to work, we drink our coffee, we shove a donut in our mouth and run out the door, and then we spend all day right on the computer, and then we get home and then we numb ourselves out in front of a TV, and then we go to bed way too late, and then it starts over the next day. So pleasure is so interesting. We automatically go to this idea of pleasure being sex, and
Yeah.
it's so much more than that. Of course, sex is one of the most pleasurable things we can do as human beings. And but there's so much more to it beyond that. It's
Yeah.
and really, this is like a part of where your joy comes from, and how restoring that. So how how do we open ourselves, like you said, kind of getting curious, but how do we open ourselves and be vulnerable to the pleasure of life? How do we do that when we're living in such a kind of a crazy world?
Yeah, for me and the way that I bring it to my clients is again like being with what is. Like you have all these beautiful senses like vision, tasting, hearing, feeling, touching, smelling, and we have those available
Yeah.
like 24/7. They're at our disposal for free. And these are literally our pleasure portals. And my invitation to clients is like, go find things that you can experience through your senses that you find easy to access. Like, go explore and choose like 2 or 3 things or 2 or 3 senses that you're going to explore every day for like a minute each. Very short, very brief. And then see how you can access pleasure in your body through your senses. And this can be something silly. Like one of the things that I, for example, really love is for kids, they have these really tiny jelly balls. You pour water over them and then they swell overnight.
Orbeez.
Orbeez.
Orbeez, yeah.
Love like running my hands through them. I absolutely love the feeling. It's so pleasurable to me. And so it helps me so much to focus because I have ADHD. So
Mhm.
when I run my hands through it and have that sensory experience, it gives me so much pleasure. Same
I
goes for discovering new music
Yeah.
or watching a sunset or tasting a new taste of tea, you
Mhm.
know? And, for me, it's really about coming back to the simplicity of what is already there, what you're already doing in your life that you don't have to like make big lifestyle shifts for, or bring in like a whole meditation, you know, like room with all the
Right.
stuff that you need. Like, no, keep it simple and
One of the
work with what is already in your
with
life.
what you have. And the amazing thing is that we are equipped with these amazing senses
Yeah.
that allow us to interact with the moment in a way that can bring us joy if we open ourselves up to that. This
Yeah.
is one of the things that I love about specifically working with women who are going through infertility or who have kind of a huge unknown. Because PCOS, that piece is really big, right? We don't know when we're going to ovulate. We don't know, what that cycle is going to look like. So the pleasure aspect, and sometimes people kind of have a hard time making that connection between the unknown, because that's like very forward thinking. It's very anxiety driven and not in the present. So pleasure in accessing your your sensual interaction with the world brings you back to present. So now, from a physiological perspective, we're bringing our nervous system back into regulation. We're
Yeah.
bringing down those levels of cortisol. We're even benefiting our insulin response because everything is starting to come back. So it's like literally, you said a portal. It is a portal to a place of kind of freedom. It feels freer.
Yeah, exactly. And
It's
the thing is, it is so simple.
It's so simple. It's like it doesn't
And
cost a thing. It literally. This is
yeah, and sometimes I have people and clients like come to me like, wow, it's so simple that I didn't even think about it. Like I was like going on this like difficult route and all these steps. I'm like, no, it's really that simple.
very easy. It's very okay, I should say it's simple, but sometimes it's not easy because you're breaking habits, right? You're
Yep,
breaking
that's true.
habits of numbing yourself out because what comes up, right? I will say, not as a disclaimer, but just it's interesting as you start to open yourself up to all of these things that lots of other things start coming up, like
Yep.
past trauma and and these big feelings about how you've been relating with your body. And so that's another reason why I love having the support, right? Having somebody there to support. Um, you know, that's what, counselors and coaches and, that's why we're here, is because you're going to go through this stuff that we've been through that we know. And, you
Yeah.
hold that space. And that is so, 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 so important um, to understand how trauma, once things start to come up, there's reasons for it to come up, and we giving yourself the space and the gentleness and the patience when those things come up. But you really do find that your life just becomes a little bit more bright, because you
Yeah,
start
that's
going
true.
in everything.
And I feel an important aspect to add to this is that we cannot heal like that in isolation.
No.
So it's very important that we have somebody else to witness this
Yeah.
and that we co-regulate with. Because
Yeah.
I feel a lot of people these days, especially if they're on infertility journeys, it's very lonely
Yeah.
and people are very alone and there is
Yes.
not much support in community because there is still so much shame and taboo over not being able to conceive
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah.
This community aspect and also being witnessed, and I think that's the most important part about my work. It's not so much about all of the tools and the tips and the tricks that I give, but the
Witnessing.
fact that people are finally witnessed by
Yeah.
someone who just sits there, who is non-judgmental and who just listens.
Listens.
Yeah.
The power of connection and community is something that I cannot stress enough,
Mm,
because it is isolating when you feel like you're going through this, and you might have a fantastic support system, and they have, your friends and your family, the people that you're close to, they love you and they care about you. At the same time, it can be really difficult for them to know how to support you.
yeah.
I remember my mom, I love my mom dearly, but it was really hard to talk to her about what I was going through because she never had a difficulty getting pregnant. She's had 6 children, and we always used to joke that, she could look at my stepdad and get pregnant. Like, it was kind of a joke. We kind of called her a rabbit, right? Because it felt that way. And right. So that's how I grew up, was thinking that. And then suddenly when it was time for me to become a mom, I was hit with this huge blow of, oh wait, you have PCOS and you're going to have medications to get pregnant, and nothing, no other support, nothing like that. And so um I, similarly, like, I don't want people who are going through this to go through this alone, to feel like they're
Yeah.
alone, because they're not. There are people that are here to help support us while we're going through that. And that's I love that that's a part of your mission, and such a kindred spirit in working with women to not only in their fertility journey, but in all aspects of their cycle. And that is something that is just, we need this so much in the world. And so this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. I'd love to talk a little bit about what Iris is offering to us. So she has this amazing hormone balancing nutrition guide that she is offering to you here at the summit. You will have that link after the interview, so just go check it out. What's the best way that people can get a hold of you, Iris, if they have questions or want to learn a little bit more about your work?
I think the best way to access me is through Instagram.
Yeah.
My work page is Cycle Seeds. On Instagram, you can find all my information. I have a link in bio that has all my offerings, all my teachings, ways to reach me. And I also offer like initial exploratory calls where people can come and talk to me about their issues, and we can see how we can work together. But the best way to come and talk to me is on Instagram.
Instagram, wonderful. I will have Iris's Instagram handle in the email as well, so make sure you check that out and give her a follow. And of course, you can message her if you have any questions or are interested in learning a little bit more about how she can support you on your journey. So this has been an absolute pleasure, Iris. I've got one more question I'd love to ask you that I've been asking all the experts here on the show. So what is one inspirational thing you would say to a woman experiencing fertility challenges with PCOS?
Oh, that's a big one. I'd say I'd have to come back to your body is not broken. Your body is trying to communicate with you. And I would also say, like, find all the ways inward that help you to feel a sense of belonging in your own body.
Yes.
Because this body will be the home of your future baby. So it's very important that you find all the ways that you can find for yourself that are pleasurable and that help you like get this sense of belonging in the body. And I have to say, like, you won't feel like that every single day. I don't feel like that every single day.
Neither do I.
But it's the practice of deeply respecting this physical form, this body that we've been given.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Iris. That was absolutely beautiful. Just this inward journey, and kind of understanding that we have the time right now while we're working through these, kind of physical challenges and with fertility. But this is seeing this as an opportunity to learn more and be more inside, and coming back to our hearts and our wombs and our centers, and understanding and learning our language of our body and how much that can impact us now as well as for the rest of our lives. So thank you so much, Iris. It's been an absolute pleasure. And we really appreciate you being here for the summit. And I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much for having me.